Hey everybody, welcome to Seriously Read a Book. My name is John, and today we are going to be reading Magic Treehouse number 8 by Mary Pope Osborne. This one is called Midnight on the Moon. So this is the first time I've ever read a Magic Treehouse book, and because I usually start things in strange places, we're starting the series with the 8th book. Will you please let me know if you like this book, and if you do, I'll read some more. Here we go. So we're going to start with a prologue. One summer day in Frog Creek, Pennsylvania, a mysterious treehouse appeared in the woods. 8-year-old Jack and his 7-year-old sister Annie climbed into the treehouse. The treehouse was filled with books, and it was magic. It could go any place that was in a book. All Jack and Annie had to do was to point to a picture and wish to go there. They visited dinosaurs, knights, an Egyptian queen, pirates, ninjas, and the Amazon rainforest. Along the way, they discovered that the treehouse belonged to Morgan Le Fay. Morgan was a magical librarian from the time of King Arthur. She traveled through time and space, gathering books for her library. One day, Jack and Annie found a note that said Morgan was under a spell. Jack and Annie set out in the magic treehouse to find 4 special things that would free her. With the help of a mouse named Peanut, Jack and Annie found the first thing in old Japan, the second in the Amazon rainforest, and the third in the Ice Age. Now Jack, Annie, and Peanut are ready to find the last thing in Midnight on the Moon. And that's this book. Oh, by the way, I just want to encourage you to get a copy of this book and read along with me. I know this is a read aloud video, but let's make it a read along video. I'd love it if you had a copy of the book and were reading as I'm reading. How cool would that be? Here we go. Chapter 1, By Moonlight. Jack, whispered a voice. Jack opened his eyes. He saw a figure in the moonlight. Wake up, get dressed. It was his sister, Annie. Jack turned on his lamp. He rubbed his eyes. Annie was standing beside his bed. She wore jeans and a sweatshirt. Let's go to the treehouse, she said. What time is it? Asked Jack. He put on his glasses. Don't look at your clock, said Annie. Jack looked at his clock. It's midnight. It's too dark. No, it isn't. The moon makes it bright enough to see, said Annie. Wait till morning, said Jack. No, now, said Annie. We have to find the 4th M thing. I have a feeling that the full moon might help us. That's nuts, said Jack. I want to sleep. You can sleep when we come back home, said Annie. No time will have passed. Jack sighed. Oh, brother, he said. But he got out of bed. Yay, whispered Annie. Meet you at the back door. She tiptoed out of Jack's room. Jack yawned. He pulled on his jeans and sneakers and a sweatshirt. He put his notebook and pencil into his backpack. Then he crept down the stairs. Annie opened the back door. Quietly, they stepped outside. Wait, said Jack. We need a flashlight. No, we don't. I told you the moon will light our way, said Annie, and she took off. Jack sighed, then followed her. Annie was right, thought Jack. The moon was so bright that he could see his shadow. Everything seemed washed with silver. Have you ever had a night like that where you looked around and it just seemed super bright and beautiful, magical? Soon they left their street. Annie led the way into the Frog Creek woods. It was much darker under the shadows of the trees. Jack looked up, searching for the treehouse. There, said Annie. The magic treehouse was shining in the moonlight. Annie grabbed the rope ladder and started climbing up. Careful. Go slowly, said Jack. He followed her up the ladder and into the treehouse. Moonlight streamed through the window. It shone on the letter M that shimmered on the wooden floor. It shone on 3 M things that rested on the M. A moonstone from the time of the ninjas, a mango from the Amazon rainforest, and a mammoth bone from the Ice Age. We just need one more M thing, said Annie, to free Morgan from her spell. Squeak! Peanut! Said Annie. In the dim light, Jack saw a tiny mouse. She sat on an open book. You didn't expect to see us this late, did you? Said Annie. She picked up Peanut, and Jack picked up the open book. So, where are we going this time? Annie asked him. Jack held the book up to the moonlight. Uh-oh, he said. I knew we should have brought a flashlight. I can't read a thing. He could make out diagrams and shadowy pictures, but he couldn't read a word. Look at the cover, said Annie. The letters were bigger on the cover. Jack squinted at them. It's called Hello Moon, he said. Oh, look. Oh, it's a picture of the two of them climbing into the treehouse. Annie gasped. We're going to the moon? Of course not, said Jack. It's impossible to go to the moon without tons of equipment. Why? There's no air. We couldn't breathe. Not only that, we'd boil to death if it was day and freeze to death if it was night. Yikes, said Annie. So where do you think we're going? Maybe a place where people train to be astronauts? Said Jack. That sounds neat, said Annie. Yeah, said Jack. He'd always wanted to meet astronauts and space scientists. So say the wish, said Annie. Jack opened the book again. He pointed to a picture of a dome-shaped structure. I wish we could go there, he said. The wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster and faster. Then everything was silent. Absolutely silent. As quiet and still as silence could be. Chapter 2. Space Motel. Jack opened his eyes. He looked out the window. The treehouse had landed inside a large white room. What kind of training place is this? Asked Annie. I don't know, said Jack. The room was round. It had no windows. It had white floors and a curved wall lit by bright lights. Hello? Annie called. There was no answer. Where were all the astronauts and space scientists? Jack wondered. There's nobody here, said Annie. How do you know? Said Jack. I just feel it, said Annie. We'd better find out where we are, said Jack. He looked at the page in the moon book. He read the words below the picture of the dome. A moon base was built on the moon in the year 2031. The top of the dome slides open to let spacecrafts enter and leave. Oh, man, Jack whispered. What's wrong? Said Annie. Jack's heart pounded with excitement. He could hardly speak. We've landed inside a moon base, he said. So, said Annie. So the moon base is on the moon, said Jack. Annie's eyes widened. We're on the moon? She asked. Jack nodded. The book says the moon base was built in the year 2031, he said. So this book was written after that, which means this book is from the future. Oh, wow, said Annie. Morgan must have gone forward in time to borrow it from a future library. Right, said Jack. And now we're in the future on the moon. Squeak, squeak. Annie and Jack looked at Peanut. The mouse was running around in circles. Poor Peanut, said Annie. She tried to pick the mouse up, but Peanut hid behind the mango on the letter M. Maybe she's nervous about being on the moon, said Annie. She's not the only one, said Jack. He let out a deep breath, then he pushed his glasses into place. So what's a moon base? Asked Annie. Jack looked at the book. He read aloud. When scientists visit the moon for short periods, they eat and sleep in the moon base. A space motel, said Annie. I guess, said Jack. He read more. The small base has a landing chamber and a room for storing spacesuits. Air and temperature controls make breathing possible. So that's why we can breathe, Jack said. Let's explore, said Annie. We have to find the fourth thing for Morgan. No, first we should study this map, said Jack. He pulled out his notebook. You study it, said Annie. Jack copied the map. Then he drew in the treehouse. Well, look at this. So we have spacesuit storeroom. There's an airlock, rocket entry. I guess that's the top on the treehouse. The treehouse is underneath the rocket entry, and this whole thing is a landing chamber. Okay, he said. He pointed at the X in his drawing. We're here. Jack looked up. Annie was gone. Oh, brother, Jack said. As usual, she had left without him, before they could even make a plan. Jack put the moon book and pencil into his pack. Carrying his notebook and backpack, he started out the window. Squeak, squeak. Jack looked back at Peanut. The mouse was running back and forth on the M. Stay here and be safe, said Jack. We'll be back soon. Jack swung himself over the windowsill. His feet touched the floor of the landing chamber. Annie, he called. There was no answer. Jack looked at his diagram. It showed only one way to go. Jack walked along the curved white wall to the stairs. He climbed the steps to a hallway. Jack, hurry! Annie was at the end of the hallway, standing in the airlock. She peered out a window in a giant door. Jack hurried toward her. Annie stepped aside so he could look out the window too. Oh, man, said Jack. What he saw took his breath away. He stared at a rocky gray land. The land was filled with giant craters and tall mountains. The sun was shining, but the sky was ink black. Say hi to the moon, Annie said softly. Chapter 3, Open Sesame. The fourth M thing must be out there, said Annie. Beside the door was a button with the word open on it. Annie reached for the button. Wait! Jack grabbed her hand. There's no air on the moon, remember? Oh, right. But we have to go out to find the M thing. Let's see what the book says, said Jack. He pulled the book out of his pack. He flipped through it until he found a page that showed the surface of the moon. He read aloud. It takes 14 Earth days to equal 1 day on the moon. No air protects the moon from the sun's rays, so daytime heat reaches 260 degrees. Jack looked at Annie. I told you our blood would boil if we went out there, he said. Yuck, she said. Jack read from the book again. Moon scientists wear spacesuits, which have controls to keep them from getting too hot or too cold. They have tanks which provide air for 2 hours. Where do we get spacesuits? Asked Annie. She looked around, then trotted back down the hall. Maybe there? Jack was studying his map. Let's try the spacesuit storeroom. Don't look at the map, said Annie. Look at the real room. Jack glanced up. Annie was peering through a doorway off the hall. There's a ton of space stuff in here, she said. Jack went to look. Bulky white suits hung from hangers. Air tanks, helmets, gloves, and boots sat in neat rows on shelves. Wow, it's like the armor room in a castle, said Jack. Yeah, with huge armor, said Annie. Let's pick out the smallest stuff, said Jack. The suits can go over our clothes. Annie found the smallest white suit, and Jack found the next smallest. They stepped into them. Then Annie locked Jack's air tank into place. Thanks, he said, and he did the same for her. Thanks, she said. Gloves? Said Jack. He and Annie pulled on white gloves. Boots? Said Annie, and they each pulled on a pair of huge white boots. Helmets? Said Jack. He reached for a helmet. Wow, they're pretty light, he said. I thought they'd be like knights' helmets. Oh, look, it's a picture of them. They're dressing each other up like astronauts. Or moon dweller people. Jack and Annie put the helmets on. They locked each other's into place. I can't move my head right or left, said Annie. Me neither, said Jack. Let's try walking. Jack and Annie moved clumsily around the room. Jack felt like a fat snowman. Close your visor, said Annie. They both closed their see-through visors. Cool air filled Jack's helmet. Ah, I can breathe, Annie yelled. Her voice boomed in Jack's ears. Ow, talk quietly, Jack said. We have two-way radios inside our helmets. Sorry, whispered Annie. Jack put the moon book back in his pack. Then he slung the pack over his shoulder. Okay, he said. Remember, we only have 2 hours of air in our tanks. So we need to find the fourth M thing really fast. I hope we can find it, said Annie. Me too, said Jack. He knew they could not go home until they did. Let's go, said Annie. She gave Jack a little push. Watch it. No goofing off, he said. We don't want to fall over in these suits. Just go, said Annie. She pushed him out of the room. They walked back to the airlock. Ready? Said Annie. Open sesame! She pressed the open button. A door slowly slid closed behind them. A door opened in front of them. And Jack and Annie stepped out onto the moon. And that is the end of part 1 of Midnight on the Moon, number 8 of the Magic Treehouse series by Mary Pope Osborne. If you liked this book, please like, subscribe, click the bell, and if you love this book, share it with someone you love. I hope you can get a copy of this book and we can read along with the next 2 parts. I'll see you next time here at Seriously Read a Book.